All right, well, welcome back to part 2 of the White Lotus of Light interview series with Jim Girouard. You can find the link to part 1 down below, and while part 2 is going to stand on its own, I highly recommend you watch part 1. Jim and I went really off the rails into all kinds of amazing spiritual, metaphysical, philosophical discussions, and I just want to take a minute to say, if you like the content on this channel and you'd like to see it grow, please hit like and subscribe. You know, I don't like asking for that, but apparently it's the single most important thing to do in order to really get your channel to grow. And I want to be able to have more great guests like Jim, Laura Eisenhower, Timothy Hogan, Sammy Richard, and some of the great guests I've had in the past. And in order to do that, I need to see this channel grow so that way I can continue to get traction and get these wonderful voices like Jim's out there. And so with that, Jim, you were saying off camera just a few minutes ago, you wanted to kind of open with some of the experiences you had that you wanted to share with the audience. So go right ahead with that.
Yeah, I want to tell you about a train ride that I took from, Central Mass to Boston. And as the train was going from, station to station, it stopped at a place called Watertown. So I was looking out the window, and I was trying to imagine in my mind what it would be like to just someday hop on the train, go to Watertown, which is a place I've never been to before, and just sort of walk around and have an adventure. And I was trying to imagine in my mind what that would look like if I got, let's say, a premonition dream about going to Watertown. And in the dream, I was able to see like markers that would let me know that I was having the experience. So what I was imagining was, if I had this dream, that I would.
Can you repeat that last part? Sorry, I didn't hear it. It glitched for a second.
The part about Watertown?
Yeah. So you said you wondered what it would be like in your dream if you had went to Watertown, and then it froze for a second.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so what I was imagining in my mind was, if I had a premonition dream about going to Watertown, there would be some markers that would let me know that it was really happening. And the two that I thought of was a big red CVS sign, and the other one was seeing a woman that was wearing a scarf.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so what happened was, I'm thinking about this, and I'm imagining during the whole entire train ride going to Boston, about this sort of thing, manifesting. Okay. So the train stops, and I get on the subway, and I'm sitting down on the subway, and there's an empty seat next to me, and this woman gets on with her son, and the son sits next to me. So I get up and gave her my seat, and I went over to the other side to a single seat. And then the door opened up, and these 4 people came in. And one of them, the last one, was this woman who was standing right next to me until the next stop. And then the next stop came, the doors opened up, and she walked out, and I get out because that was my stop also. And she went up the stairs. I went up the stairs. And then when she got to the top of the stairs and went outside, I was standing there looking at her, and I turned around and I saw a big red CVS sign. And when I looked at her, she was wearing a scarf.
Wow. So what you were imagining would happen in your dream instead happened in reality.
It happened.
Yeah, that's wild.
It happened within 45 minutes.
That's crazy. So you imagined, so you were already planning to do this trip to Watertown. Then you imagined what if you had a premonition dream what you would look for to know that you were having a premonition dream. And then
Right,
those exact same things that you had imagined were exactly what occurred.
exactly.
That's awesome.
And not only that, but it happened 5 or 6 more times that same week.
Wow.
But it happened in different ways, like it would happen on the phone or it happened on another train ride. All the same factors, you know, about the CVS sign and the girl with the scarf, all of these things happened many, many times after that.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
So I think there's a point where you can visualize it, and then, you know, I want to say you're making it happen, but I don't think you're making it happen. I think it just happens.
So you think it a bit more of by visualization, you're actually tapping into psychic ability of premonition. Was that how you would maybe describe that?
Well, with me, it's more like intuition than psychic, because I don't think I'm very psychic at all, but I do have good intuition.
That's interesting. You know, my son has become more interested recently hearing me talk about like theurgic angelic magic and just spirits and that sort of thing. And he, you know, he's like, well, how do you see or hear, you know, angels, for example, or you know, earth elemental spirits or what have you? And I told him that what you have to do when you're working with these sort of subtle realms is that you have to have tremendous trust in your intuition, and also that your imagination is is sort of the bridge between this world and the other world, and that we, you know, I don't think it's by accident that society has gone out of its way to crush imagination, you know, getting rid of imaginary friends, this sort of thing, intentionally. I think it's because the people who run things, who understand the spiritual dimension of the world, they don't want a bunch of people realizing their full potential and power. And so they don't want people to have the root of all that power, which is the imagination and the access to the spiritual realm, of which there are very objectively real things, because you'll get second and third and fourth party even confirmation of a lot of these things. I know I've had that happen many, many times where I have some experience of a spirit, or I have some experience from a spirit where like a spirit or an angel tells me X, Y, or Z thing, and then lo and behold, it happens, you know, so that's a secondary confirmation. But I've also had it to where I have a certain kind of interaction with, say, like the Fey realms, the so-called fairies, and then I'll talk to other people who are working with the Fey realms. And fairies, by the way, aren't at least the way I experience them, are not like this kind of Disney thing. They're much closer to the Brothers Grimm Celtic mythos, which is to say they're alien, and they're you know, they're just so different from humans in the way that they think that that they're neither good nor bad, and even neutral is a strange way of describing them. They're more foreign than any human can possibly be in terms of how they think and operate. But talking to other people who interact with the Fae, they will tell me virtually identical experiences. And this isn't stuff that's textbook stuff either. It's like I have a, you know, I interact with the Fae and they tell me X, Y, or Z thing about what their thoughts are and what's going on in the world or whatever kind of thing. And then someone will tell me without even me telling them that they had the exact same kind of experience. I've also had people who have had experiences. I haven't experienced this myself, but where they had an experience with DMT, the substance DMT, and that they had seen, reptilian entities, and that these reptilian entities came and sat with them and said, humanity's in this like teenage sort of place where, in terms of spiritual development, that they're approaching maturity, but they kind of wax and wane between childish behavior and starting to approach adult behavior. And I told this to an atheist friend of mine, and he goes, that's really weird, because a friend of mine who smoked DMT told me that he was then taken to the Amazon and the leaves parted, and then this female reptilian woman in a like traditional Amazonian headdress came to him and said, I've come to talk to you and tell you about humanity's at this exact, and says the exact same thing. And this guy, you know, I thought he was messing with me, and he's like, no, I mean, I don't know what to make of what these people said. Maybe it just sets off a certain part of the brain. You know, like he had some nonsense materialist explanation for it, but he was quite sincere. And that's not even an example I like because it relies on someone other than me. But that's the kind of thing that can happen that can give you that secondary and even tertiary validation of people having virtually identical experiences that are not like from some kind of written source or YouTube source or whatever, to where, you know, people got it in their minds because of whatever, but it's direct experiential data, so to speak. And so getting back to my point, the imagination, once you start to cultivate and trust it, is the exact same way in which you interact with these subtle realms, which is to say, almost everyone's experienced daydreams to where they're sitting there and then suddenly the world around them kind of fades away as they start visualizing whatever kind of thing. The world's still there, but something comes that's almost like a thin mesh screen between you and the physical world you're observing around you, and you can visualize something quite deeply, a daydream. That same mechanism, but when you control it to some degree, or actually better put, surrender to it and let it flow and let it show you what it's going to show you, that's where you can really start having those interactions to where you can have the exact kind of experience you just described. And I don't know whether you would describe that as intuition, but I mean, you mentioned visualization and then you imagined it. That to me is the same, it's the same sort of substance there. Would you agree with that? I mean, what do you think about what I just said?
Well, it was definitely visual, and it was definitely intuitive, but I kind of shy away from using psychic because I don't see myself as being someone who's psychic, but I do have good intuition.
What do you see as the distinction between those two?
Well, for me, I don't want people to think I'm psychic because then they'll start asking me questions.
Oh, I see.
See what I mean?
It would create problems if you had that label. It's the label you don't like. See, for me, I would say.
If you tell them you're intuitive, they're not going to start asking you if they're going to meet the girl.
Yeah, we talked about that in part one, about how people always with divination, they want to know, am I going to meet the girl? Am I going to meet the boy? Am I going to get the job? And it's like, as a Vedic astrologer, let me tell you, almost all the questions are, when's the money coming and when's the love of my life coming? It's like clockwork. You know, when I get someone who asks me something else, I'm just like, wow, this is amazing. Like, let's look at that, you know? And like, there's so much more to it. And yet people are very focused on, am I going to get money? And am I going to get a partner?
But when I throw the dice, I ask the question, what do I need to know next?
Mm-hmm.
That way it leaves it wide open.
Yeah. I'll sometimes do, you know, I did a tarot reading at the beginning of 2021, like literally 1 minute after midnight. I did a tarot reading. I like to do various different, I don't know, intuitive exercises or divination methods right after midnight on the first of the year. I mean, it's an arbitrary date really, but I just like to do it then. And I did a tarot reading for the first 6 months of 2021. And it was just a nightmare. It was just a total like train wreck of that train was carrying dumpsters that were on fire. And let me tell you, never before have I had such an accurate tarot reading. It was horrifying. But the thing is, I specifically asked what's coming in the next 6 months, you know, up until the end of June. And if I had just asked what's coming this year, I would have probably got a totally different reading, because the first 6 months were very much, you know, I don't know if you know the saying, solve et coagula, which is the dissolving and then the reformation of stuff. It's the alchemical process. The first half of the year was very much solve, like I had tried to get back together with my ex-wife, which I don't know what the heck I was thinking. We'd been divorced for like a year, and I somehow like started to end up talking with and then dating my ex-wife even though there was a couple of other women at the time who were interested that were really like objectively much better fits. And so I went through this nightmare attempting to fix things with my ex-wife, and she ended up leaving me for this other guy, and which I was actually very grateful for in real time. And then this group that I'd been a part of, I found out that it was incredibly fraudulent. I'll just leave it at that, to a nightmarish degree. And I had been like in a leadership position, and I found that there was deep, profound fraud, and I had wasted all this time and being involved in it. And just a bunch of, just everything that could go wrong did go wrong in the first 6 months of the year. And then in July, I met Nora. You know, it's how we have connected here. And we just had this incredible, I had completely given up. I had completely given up on meeting the girl. And I had actually done sigil magic last summer, and so had Nora, interestingly enough. And we both were thinking about other people. We weren't, even though we actually kind of met each other because of this, we were both thinking about other people. And when she did part of the magic that she did, it came through that Ferguson knows the way, and the stars have to be aligned. And so she was like, Ferguson, huh? And she went on Facebook and typed in, and we had one friend in common at the time. And what's weird is that this friend, I know her, you know, I've known her a little bit here and there. She's part of a Templar group that I'm a part of. And she was actually visiting me last summer, the summer of 2020. And I mean, I've only spent maybe 7 or 8 total days of my life around this woman, this mutual friend that Nora and I had on Facebook. And I was with her when Nora sends me a friend request from the Czech Republic and says, I did a reading and it said, Ferguson knows the way and the stars need to align. And your name popped up as a Ferguson. And I see you're an astrologer. I wonder if you would do an astrology chart for me. And she wanted me to do a chart about one of these other men that she was interested in. And we just ended up talking. And then we ended up meeting, and it was amazing. Sorry, go ahead.
Was it a dice reading that she did and then contacted you?
You know what? I think it might have been your dice reading divination method, which, wow, that would be incredible. She's not handy, or else I would ask her. But I believe that, yeah, I believe they did use that method as part of it. And Ferguson knows the way was part of what came up. Oh, there it is from off camera. Yes, it was a dice coded message. So there we go. This is a ringing endorsement of your method. I hadn't actually linked these two facts. But so we both had done this calling in a soulmate ritual, and both of us had to go through, I will tell you, we had to burn through all this hellish karma in order for the two of us to come together. And we both had to kind of like completely submit to the universe. The universe kind of had us like the alpha dog by the throat. We were like, we submit. We can't get what we want. We give up. Like, you know, we just want love, but whatever. Like, and we had to completely burn through all this hellish karma with exes and really bad situations we were both obsessed with and whatever. But it was, we met, you know, in person. We'd been talking the entire year a lot, but we met finally in person just a few, like 10 days into July. And then we just, you know, fell in love to an incredible degree very, very quickly. And then I've never gotten along better with anyone ever in my life. And
you're an excellent match for her.
Oh, well, thank you. And so just to get at this last little bit, the point is that when you do divination, it is really all about the question, which is that I asked, what are the first 6 months going to look like?
It's all about the question.
And I almost threw my freaking cards in the fireplace when I got that reading, because I was so furious, because it's the worst reading I have ever had in my life. It had like the 9 of swords. It had the 10 of swords. It had the tower. And I feel like I had some other, like the fuck you card, which doesn't even exist, somehow popped out of the tarot deck. Like, you're screwed, buddy. It was just a nightmare reading. What?
The Joker card.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh man, it was such a nightmare. And it was like so chilling when I did it, and it was so absolutely correct. And so it's sometimes better to not be that specific, because if you're asking a super specific question of, will I meet the girl or whatever, the universe is going to be like, you don't need to worry about meeting the girl right now. You got to worry about burning through this karma that's preventing you from being ready to meet the girl or whatever it is.
Did Nora tell you about the package that I sent to her that arrived in 3 days?
No, that's incredible. That's an amazing story. You don't even need any additional context to get from the US to Czech Republic in 3 days. It's insane.
Like if I sent you a package from the East Coast to the West Coast, it would take 5 to 7 days.
At least, yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know if it was magic that made that happen in 3 days, or maybe what happened was when I brought the package to the post office, maybe they put it directly on the truck. The truck went directly to the airport. They put it directly from the truck to the plane. Then the plane flew over to Europe. And then the truck was there when it arrived in Europe and delivered it. And 3 days later, she got the package in her mailbox.
That's wild. That's wild.
It was a 26 dice that I sent her.
Oh.
Along with a CD of my songs.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. That's incredible that I didn't realize that.
I've never heard of 3 days.
No.
Going from central Massachusetts to Europe in 3 days?
That's insanity.
I would think 2 weeks maybe.
Yeah, you'd be lucky to get it. It feels like you'd be lucky to get it like from one side of the state to the other in 3 days.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's wild. Yeah. No, she hadn't told me that, but that's really fascinating. I find that divination always tells you what you need to know, not what you want to know. It always tells you what you need to know.
It might not be what you'd like to hear.
Yes, exactly. That's what happened to me. That tarot reading is literally like, I wanted to burn that deck. I was like, okay, this deck is cursed. Like, there's no worldly explanation. Like the statistical odds of, I did like a Celtic crossbred, and it just got worse and worse, and it culminated in the tower. And I was just like it opened with the 9 of Swords, I think it was, and then ended in the tower. And it had every bad card. I think it had the 3 of Swords in there for heartbreak. It had everything. It was like I had specifically made looked at them all face up and made a terrible reading. It would have been hard to make one that bad.
I think you're going to find as you progress with the dice readings that these readings are very animated in the way that like we have a certain way of saying things. Like we have sayings.
Mm-hmm.
Like one I think of is like, don't step on the crack, you break your mother's back. There's all of these things. Don't let the bed bugs bite, and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
Each person has a sort of like a twang or a way of saying things. Mm-hmm. And you'll find in the dice readings that it's almost as though there's somebody there in the room talking to you and using some sort of animated language to tell you, to get the message across. Just like I'm sitting here talking to you right now. Like one time I got a reading and it said, "Shut up, you're asking too many questions." that was exactly what I was doing.
Yeah.
I was asking, am I going to meet the girl kind of question. Of course, it was a different subject each time, but kept, really pushing the envelope.
Mm-hmm.
And then the answer that you're getting is from your own higher self. You're not channeling a bunch of spirits that just all of a sudden come in and you don't know who they are. You're not wondering if you're going to be deceived by some, deceiving spirit, because you're not channeling.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all you're doing is you're contacting your higher self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because I had someone I knew who I trusted for a long period of time, and I started to wonder after a while. I couldn't tell whether this person who I then they completely lost my trust. was they themselves were being, I don't know, like having an ulterior motive or an ulterior agenda, or whether they would channel a specific spirit, and it would say, it would say all kinds of like really highly accurate stuff, but then it was like it would throw in stuff that was just outright false. And then I couldn't tell, like, is this person deceiving me, or is this person deceived by the spirit? And so going directly to your higher self is definitely more trustworthy by far than going to spirits. Spirits can do amazing things, and you have to be really careful because, like you say, there can be deceiving spirits, or there can be a lot of people want to conceive of everything as like black and white, good and evil, and blah blah blah, and that's not really how things work in my experience. Whether it's talking about extraterrestrials, which you brought up earlier, or whatever, everything has an agenda. I've even come to discover, I work not exclusively, but primarily with angels and archangels and like this sort of the celestial hierarchy. But even they have an agenda. And you might agree with that agenda, but they have an agenda. And so the agenda of your higher self is really is for your greatest good. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to get what you want out of your higher self's communications, but you're certainly going to get stuff that's going to help progress you and move you forward.
I was wondering if I could tell you another story.
Yeah, please.
Okay, did you ever hear of Enigma TV?
Enigma TV?
Yeah.
I haven't heard of it, no.
It's this guy named Chris Everard. He's a really, top-notch documentary maker. I think he's the best in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, he did a video where he went into one of these churches that was hundreds of years old.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a bunch of statues that were lined up along the walls of this church.
Mm-hmm.
And, he was saying that a lot of these statues represented demons, such as Goetia demons and that sort of thing. And one of them actually was a Goetia demon by the name of Volak.
Mm-hmm.
And Volak is a young-looking boy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got the idea of, maybe I could get a message from Volak if I did a reading. So what I did was I took the dice and I said, Volak, what sayest thou? And I got an answer, but the answer wasn't from Volak, it was from his legions. And what they said to me was that I couldn't contact Volak directly. Now, I didn't know maybe if I made a mistake or maybe I did something wrong, because this is really like the first time I was experimenting with the dice method.
Mm-hmm.
So about a year or so later, I realized that when addressing an entity and asking them to send a message, you should describe the way that they look. Like in the Ars Goetia, there's a description of Volak, and it's a young boy, and there may be some other details I can't remember, but if you read out loud the details of this description of the entity, then I started getting messages from Volak because I was now addressing what he looked like in his nature. So it took me a long time to learn that one, I guess you call it a lesson or whatever, that, if you just say the person's name and what sayest thou, they don't answer.
That's interesting because it's similar when you do, I'm a theurgic angelic magician, among other things. And when you want to contact angels, you have to first contact the archangel Raziel. And in fact, you have to even contact an aspect of Raziel called Arzel first. And you go from Arzel then to Raziel, and then Raziel acts like, again, probably my viewers aren't old enough, a lot of them, to know this, but it used to be with telephone systems, you would call and ask an operator to connect you with someone. And certainly if you didn't have a phone number because they didn't have computers in those days. And they had this gigantic board in front of them that was called a switchboard. And they would take a plug out of one plug and put it into another plug in order to connect a call. And that's kind of how this Archangel Raziel works. And
Yeah,
so you have to appeal to these, spirits or beings in a certain kind of way to get their attention or to be given access to them. You can't,
Right.
generally speaking, unless you have already worked with this angel in the past, you can't, generally speaking, connect with specific of the angels without going through Raziel, Archangel Raziel first.
Yeah,
So that's interesting.
Raziel taught occult magic to Adam and Eve.
I didn't know that. That's interesting. It makes sense. I mean, he's kind of the archangel of spiritual knowledge, really, is one way of describing him. Universal knowledge.
Do they sort of show up in invisible form before you?
So that's really depends on. It kind of really depends on just the individual experience. When I do the angelic calls, I have to visualize them as part of it. And this is something I teach, by the way, viewers. When you do angelic calls, sometimes I experience them as like physically there, but what has happened for me personally, and everybody's experience of this sort of thing is different. What happens for me personally is when I've completed the ritual, because it's like ceremonial Solomonic magic, when I've completed the ritual, then the angels generally do appear to me. And they appear more clearly with all this kind of stuff. For me, it's easier to do with my eyes closed when I really want to visualize whatever kind of being. It comes to me more easily with my eyes closed, but I'll even experience it with my eyes open. And I've been experiencing personally the seraphim at the end of when I'm done with the angelic call and the ritual, and beneath the seraphim will be the angels that I'm trying to directly work with. But I usually get some sort of message from the seraphim, which usually is something effective like you need to give to charity, or like we're going to grant you this abundance, but you need to give some amount to charity, or you have a friend who would be really prone to being able to use angelic magic, and you need to really encourage them. And like I had a friend I kind of had to, I don't want to say badger, but I had to kind of repeatedly say it, and then they were open to it, and like they now want to learn. But I've been given messages, and then sometimes I've been given messages about, like there was a day when I was really angry with a relative, and I was bad mouthing them, and the angels were like, if you understood what they're going through, you wouldn't be bad mouthing them, and you need to work on your compassion. And so I usually see the angels at the end of the process, and then they'll sort of say, yes, we're going to grant whatever, but they often will have messages for me that usually have to do with things I need to sort of like work through, or messages to give to others. So
that must be who in the dice readings is telling me to smarten up.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, or it could be your higher self. I've definitely had that thing where I've been like, I don't like these tarot deck answers. Let's do another spread.
Right.
And I'm gonna just keep doing it. And what I find happens is like, as I continue to spread, it just eventually goes blah, nonsense.
Right.
It's like now there's no structure at all, and it's like turned off.
I want to show you a ring that I'm wearing.
Oh wow, yeah, it's the Solomonic ring. Looks like. Yeah. That's fascinating. That's fascinating, and it ties back into something that we'll have to discuss off camera later.
Sometimes I charge it on a Krishna deity.
On a what?
Krishna deity.
Oh.
And I use the oath from Green Lantern.
Oh yeah, and remind me what that is. I used to like Green Lantern when I was a kid, but I'm fading on what that oath is. I can't remember.
In brightest day and blackest night, no evil shall escape my sight.
Mm.
Beware my power, Green Lantern's light.
Hmm. Huh. That's cool. How fascinating.
Except I don't use Green Lantern at the end of the oath. I use Juggernaut instead because the deity that I use it on is Lord Juggernaut.
Is there an actual deity called Lord Juggernaut, or is this a
Well,
deity?
well, you know, there's an English word, Juggernaut.
Right.
Juggernaut is the English version of the word Juggernaut, which is one of the expansions of Lord Krishna.
Huh. I did not know that. So Juggernaut makes me think more of Ganesha, because Ganesha is like the remover of obstacles, and Juggernaut's like boom, boom, boom. You know, thinking about I'm talking about the Marvel comic here. But that's interesting. So I didn't know that there was a very similar word for Krishna to the English word Juggernaut. That's interesting.
There is an expansion, which is a morph between Ganesh and Juggernaut.
Hmm.
I think it's called Jugganesh,
Hmm.
where
Huh.
the two of them are combined as one.
Interesting. Hmm.
You don't see it very often, but once in a while you come across it.
Yeah, I'll have to. That's another thing I'll have to add to my list of things to look up after our interview. So I am needing to wrap up here pretty soon, and I wanted to ask a couple of final questions here. So, what spiritual practices would you recommend to the viewers, if anything?
One time I was talking to a girl in Australia, and she had been to the Hare Krishna restaurant, and some of the devotees had been talking to her about Krishna consciousness and things like that. And I was talking to her outside the restaurant, and she was telling me that she was going to travel around the world and just basically study all the different religions. And what I said to her was, you know, if you travel around the world and you study the various religions, you're following the path that your heart of desires is taking you towards.
Mm.
So whatever a person is attracted to is the direction that they should go in, because otherwise you're just getting a bunch of dictation and dogma. And you know, these spiritual groups, they start off like a family, and then they get really, really big and popular, and then they become an organization, and then they become a corporation, and then all they're interested in is, after a while, is just selling T-shirts.
Yeah, it's really
It
true.
happens to all spiritual groups.
Mm-hmm.
It's unfortunate, but that's what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I would say follow, you know, whether it's the right-hand path or the left-hand path, just follow it according to your desire.
How do you square that with like perhaps more base impulses? I mean, there are actually some there's some teachings in certain Hindu sects of where they're like, oh, you want to go to a brothel all the time? Do it. Don't resist it. Just go into it fully. And there's even a story about like some guy who just became just totally dove into debauchery, and I guess he had the money to do this, and eventually was able to attain enlightenment by completely quenching that desire. Like eventually he had just done everything he ever wanted to do, I guess, in bed. And suddenly, like just one day, like the desire was just gone. And all of a sudden he elevated beyond and out of that. And I want to just put the caveat out there that obviously, like, I'm not recommending this. I'm just relating a story that is out there about.
I know exactly where you're going with this.
Mm-hmm.
I think eventually you're going to carry out these desires regardless of how degraded they are. That is, if they are degraded, even if they are degraded desires. It's like I was talking about earlier about detachment and denial. A
Mm.
lot of people think they're following a spiritual path of, of detachment, but they're actually in a state of denial. They're
Yeah, spiritual bypassing.
suppressing their desires, and then 20, 30 years later, they wind up going right back to the drugs or the alcohol or extortion or whatever it is they were into before. But the
Mm.
thing about acting on impulse is not good.
Mhm.
It's never good to act on an impulse. That's why some parents, when they're talking to their kids, they'll tell them, before you act, just count to 10. When you count to 10, it gives you a chance to think about it a little further, and you're more than likely not going to do it.
Mhm.
But, acting on impulse is never good because you're not thinking ahead.
Right.
Unless it's a situation where someone's life is in danger and you have to jump in front of a truck or jump in the water or whatever, you do it on impulse, but the end result is you save the person's life.
Right. Right.
That's kind of a different situation, but the kind of impulse I'm talking about is, I think I'll jump on a plane and go to Las Vegas, Nevada and gamble all my money and lose it all. I mean, lots of people have done that, gone to Las Vegas
Yeah.
on the impulse that they might win, but how many winners are there?
Yeah, I'm sure the house has done the math on that. Not many is the
Yeah,
answer.
they lose their wife, they lose their house, they lose their money, they lose their job.
But then they can go into a country music career.
Well, yeah,
I
if they
lost
have
my wife and my job and my money.
if they have a GMC pickup truck and a shotgun and a dog, and write a song about how they lost their shotgun and the dog and the
Yeah, the
pickup truck,
truck.
then they can sing their song and get rid of the Martians like in the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a great movie. I forget what it's called, whatever, the attack from Mars or something like that. Mars Attacks, that's what it's called.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There might be some truth to country music making their heads explode.
And I lose a bunch of subscribers who are big country music fans. I actually like certain stuff like old school. Gosh, I can't think of that woman's name, but Patsy Cline, that kind of thing. I like stuff that's
I
more
like, there's lots of country music I like,
yeah,
especially bluegrass.
yeah. I was just about to say bluegrass. Yeah, and I love the Appalachian folk music, which is kind of like Irish folk music modified with the American experience, really. But yeah, so I want to ask you one last question, and then we'll be done, and then you and I can talk a little bit afterwards because there's something I wanted to share with you. So a final thought is, what would you, and this can be anything, and it's just whatever you think, what would you tell my viewers is the most important thing they can do right now to help the planet? I know that's kind of a big question, but answer it however you like.
Well, there's a lot of videos out there. There's probably 1 million videos of, like the blueprint of this world and the evil behind it and that sort of thing. And I think there's a lot of focus going in that direction where everybody's kind of studying this blueprint of what the evil agenda looks like. I don't feel like I have to go there myself because I knew what it looked like a long time ago.
Me too.
But there are some people, I think, that really need to look at it and study it voluntarily. And if they don't do it voluntarily, they're going to get kicked in the face with reality. So it's like one or the other. You look objectively at what's going on and look at it realistically, because you're taking it's a life and death thing. If you don't make the right decisions, you're gonna wind up on the wrong end of a shotgun. And you don't want to wind up there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you know, for what it's worth, I said kind of early in I think part one about how I had a strange thing where I had a spiritual experience. I actually had a vision in January of 2001 that more or less showed me in symbolic form, although it did show me basically New York was the epicenter, that 9/11 was going to happen in January of 2001. So then when 9/11 happened, it was like, whoa. And it also showed me that there would be two events that would happen after that that would be also very devastating, but that eventually that it would lead to this like spiritual awakening of humanity. And I know that those two events then that came after were the market crash and the fallout from that, and then this you know, the pandemic that's happening now seems to be the third one, and that was the third wave was the most like destructive one. And so I saw that, and I was not super spiritual at that point in time. I had just taken a Religions of India class, which started to awaken me by reading the Bhagavad Gita in particular, started to wake me up. But I was pretty materialist at that point in time. I was very spiritual when I was young, and then the hormones hit, and I kind of took a decade off of being spiritual and let the hormones fog my brain, I guess. And but so I had this like kind of minor spiritual awakening, and then it kind of just, you know, trailed off. And I had, I don't know, I mean, I guess I like had an experience with Reiki. I had some spiritual stuff happen, but it was nothing compared to like what I experience now or would experience in the years after. But then 9/11 happened, and I had this huge political awakening. And during that political awakening, I really, like I said in part one, I really stared into the abyss, you know. I really stared into the abyss of this plan, as you're calling it. And the abyss definitely stared back, like Nietzsche said, and it impacted me, and it darkened me in a certain way, but it also brought up all this repressed material for me and all this karma and stuff. And then I had to then spend like kind of the next 20 years, and it's an ongoing process of doing internal alchemy on that darkness that came up. Because as we talked about in part one, like where is the difference between the internal world and the external world? You know, they're kind of one and the same, and we are all kind of creating it together to some degree. And so for me, the way that it happened was that I had to have this political awakening before I could have a spiritual awakening. And I had to have a real, you know, not one, I wish it was a dark night of the soul. It should be called the dark multiple decades of the soul.
Yeah.
You know, forget dark night, is dark, you know, weeks past, months past, years past. I mean, I've had a lot of joy and wonderful stuff happen over the past 20 years, but I've had many, many, many dark nights of the soul where I just had to really face it. And it's like you were talking about as well, about a lot of people are in denial and are doing, you know, what's commonly called spiritual bypassing, whereas where the real power lies, where you really have that self-determination, is by actually looking into it, looking into your own darkness, looking into the darkness of the world. And then, you know, that causes you to kind of go, oh, and retreat back into yourself. And that's where the real magic can happen, is when you start doing that work inside of yourself. At least that's what I find. And so that's interesting that you would tell people to, yeah, go take a look. If you haven't already, go take a look at what's really going on. And I actually have a guest coming up in a couple of weeks named Bantam Joe, he's really laid the plan out point by 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 point on a technological level, you know. And so you'll be able to gaze into the abyss here in a couple of weeks on this exact channel. You know, you might want to steel yourself for it and prepare yourself for some strong medicine, because what he's uncovered is not pleasant. But strangely, you know, I just feel like people who are meant to survive this are going to survive this, and people who are not meant to survive this won't. And that sounds like fatalistic, or it might sound terrifying to some people, you know, who are wrapped in fear right now. But you know, I think that that fear, you should instead go, well, what am I really afraid of? And usually what the answer is pain and death. And that ask yourself, what is that? And start to ask yourself, really, what is death? And start to look in things like reincarnation and the evidence for reincarnation. Because if there's reincarnation, why are you so afraid of death? It's like, it's like doing the next life on the video game, but it's even better than that because you're not stuck in that same spot in Super Mario trying to jump over the goddamn pit. You actually are in a totally new situation completely, and your soul's ready to keep learning.
Yeah, the only thing better than reincarnation is to not reincarnate at all.
Yeah, that gets real appealing after a while. That gets real appealing, just the idea of like, getting out of samsara and going back to source. And I mean, nobody really knows for sure. It's a belief that I happen to hold. What I don't believe is that that there's some negative aspect to death. I believe that one way or the other, whether you're merging back with God or source or whatever, or whether you're reincarnating, I don't believe in hell. I believe there is an infernal realm, there are demons and that sort of thing, but I don't believe in this eternal torment thing forever and ever. I think that's one of the most pernicious and horrific ideas that's ever been put out there. It's one of the worst fear memes that's ever been put out there, and it's put out there to control people, just straight up. I don't believe it has any metaphysical basis. I'm not saying there's not an infernal realm, but nothing is forever. And even these things that, oh, go ahead.
You just get thrown out of a Christian church.
Yeah.
They absolutely believe hell is forever.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, not all of them, but some of them are smart, some of them are actually smarten up a little.
Mm-hmm.
But this whole thing about hell being forever, no.
Definitely not. At worst, at absolute worst, it's a place that a soul goes to reflect upon how they really missed that everything is connected and that we're all reflections of one another and we're all part of the one. And so you have to maybe review the things that you have done to others, perhaps in an experiential way, if even that's true.
It could be hellish for a person who's on the wrong heavenly planet.
Yeah, that's true. One man's heaven is another man's hell. It's really true. Like some people hate chocolate and other people are like, boy, I could eat chocolate every day. What if I could eat chocolate every day and I wouldn't get diabetes and I wouldn't get fat and I could just eat chocolate all day, every day? First of all, you'd probably get tired of that. But second of all, like my son hates chocolate, which, if I didn't see him come out of his mom, I would have been like, is this even my child? He'll probably like chocolate when he's older.
I don't know how much sense this would make to you, but the reason I don't eat chocolate is because I like it so much.
I would need to hear the underpinning of that philosophy. I don't eat it very much, even though I really like it.
Once in a while, I'll eat it, but it's the kind of thing I could eat every day of the week and sort of overdo it, So I'm just, I'm one of these people of extremes, really. So if I was going to get into eating chocolate, I'd go crazy on eating chocolate, so I don't do it at all.
That's true. Like you recognize the addictive nature of it.
Yeah.
For you. Yeah, totally.
I'm that way with everything. I tend to obsess on, like I create a lot of recipes and try different food combinations, and it's like an addiction, and then it comes to you hit a brick wall and then create another recipe.
Yeah.
Start the cycle all over again,
Yeah, it's funny. It's a recipe reincarnation.
Yeah.
You and I will talk a little bit more after we shut the camera off, but I think that this is a great place to end. I think that that's a really, hopefully that last little bit is liberating for viewers who got it this far. And if you did, fantastic. Thank you for watching. Thank you so much, Jim, for being on the show. I'll have to have you on again. Fantastic conversation today. But I'm going to go ahead and end here. And so thanks for watching. Thanks, viewers. And I'll link to Jim's website or social media, however he screens via maybe email. And so if people want to get a reading with Jim, he's selective, but he does sometimes do free readings. Apparently for some people, it requires palms, pictures of the palms, both palms to be sent to him by email. And then he makes a decision of whether or not he has the time and whether or not he feels like it's a good energetic match. And then he can use his divination method perhaps. So I'll have all that information down below this video. And until next time, thanks for watching. Bye.